Most lives don't end suddenly. They fade, in blood pressure unchecked, in steps avoided, in silence mistaken for peace. After 75, the body no longer shouts, but it still speaks. And if we learn how to listen, some exits can be delayed. Others quietly walked around. Number 1, heart and blood pressure. Frank used to think his heart would carry him quietly into old age. It had survived decades of coffee, arguments, silence, and the weight of things unsaid. He called it loyal, stubborn maybe, but steady. Then, one morning, he paused halfway up the stairs. Not from pain, just breath that didn't arrive when it should have. He waited, hand on the wall, eyes tracing the edge of a picture frame he couldn't remember hanging. He didn't tell anyone, not at first. But the staircase grew longer, shoes heavier, sleep thinner. His daughter came by one afternoon and watched him tie his shoelaces. His breath caught. She didn't say anything, just reached for her phone later, quietly. At the clinic, the numbers blinked. Too high, the nurse said. Not alarming, but urgent. His doctor didn't scold. She placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "It's not too late, but it is time." They talk not about pills, but about potatoes, salt, stillness, and how a heart doesn't ask for perfection, just fewer things to fight. Frank went home and sat by the window, watched the wind move the hedge. Then he stood, laced his shoes, walked to the mailbox, then past it. 15 minutes, then 20. He started steaming vegetables, cut the salt, drank more water, slept with the window cracked. Each ritual wasn't dramatic, but his chest grew quiet, his mornings less reluctant. He still missed his old pace, but he no longer missed the breath he used to chase. Now, each morning, before anyone wakes, he stands barefoot on the porch, presses his hand gently to his chest, and waits, not for warning, but for rhythm. 2. Falls and balance. Ruth didn't fall because she was clumsy. She fell because, somewhere along the way, she stopped believing the ground would meet her feet. She had grown cautious. First it was the rug by the sink, then the second step on the porch, then her own living room, a space she'd moved through blindfolded in younger years, now filled with invisible questions. She held chairs as she passed, touched walls without meaning to, took smaller steps, like someone rehearsing an apology. And then, one morning, while reaching for a teacup, her foot caught the edge of a slipper, and the floor rose faster than her hands could answer. There was no dramatic crash, just the quiet insult of betrayal. From legs she thought still knew the rhythm of standing. She didn't break a bone, but something else cracked. Not loudly, just a belief. At the hospital, they asked about medications, about blood pressure, about dizziness. She nodded, answered softly. But inside, something had already retreated. Her daughter found a therapist, one who didn't begin with equipment, but with noticing. The first session wasn't about exercise. It was about standing in bare feet, on cool tile, eyes closed, listening to heels, to arches, to the whisper of balance beneath her skin. They practiced rising from a chair, not fast, but with attention. They placed marbles on the floor, not to be picked up, just to be looked at and remembered. And slowly, Ruth began to return. She started walking to the mailbox again, then to the bird bath, then around the garden, with her hands at her sides. Not because she was confident, but because she'd learned that steadiness doesn't come from muscle. It comes from the choice to trust your body after it's made a mistake. 3. Lung health and pneumonia. Edgar used to open the windows every morning, even in winter, just for a moment. He liked how the cold cleared the air, how breath steamed in the kitchen like soft proof that he was still here. But somewhere between one January and the next, he stopped. Too cold, too sharp, too much trouble maybe. The house grew still. Air thickened with cooking and quiet. He moved less, spoke less, breathe shorter. And then one morning, he didn't get up. No fever, just a heaviness in his chest, a weariness that wrapped around his ribs and wouldn't leave. By the time they brought him to the hospital, his breath had shrunk into a thin thread. Pneumonia, they said, not dangerous, not yet, but it could be. Recovery was slow. The machines worked for him while he rested, but each inhale felt borrowed, thin, uncertain. When he returned home, he sat by the window again, didn't open it, just watched. Then one day, he cracked it, a slit of air, enough to feel the difference between outside and in. He started walking the hallway, touching the walls, whispering to himself just to test the shape of his lungs. His doctor called it pulmonary rehabilitation. Edgar just called it coming back. Each morning, he opens the window now, boils a kettle, sits in the same chair, counts 5 slow breaths. In through the nose, out through the lips, like steam. Not a cure, just a return. A ritual of remembering that breath is not automatic. It's something we choose to receive again and again. 4. Stroke and blood pressure. Awareness. Marjorie always said her headaches were just the air pressure, the kind that moved in with the weather and left when the clouds did. She didn't believe in fuss, didn't believe in doctors unless bones were broken or blood was visible. But then, one afternoon, she forgot how to find the sugar bowl, stood in her own kitchen, hand hovering in midair, mind searching for something it used to know without asking. It passed, but not completely. Later, her neighbor called out her name across the fence, and for the first time in decades, Marjorie didn't remember it. Not just the name, but the shape of the woman's voice. Something inside her shifted, not fear, but recognition. At her daughter's gentle urging, she agreed to a visit. No sirens, no emergencies, just a soft blood pressure cuff and a long silence. The numbers were high, not new, just noticed. Her doctor didn't say stroke, she said still time. Marjorie bought a small monitor. Nothing fancy. Each morning, before the kettle whistled, she slid the cuff on, pressed the button, and waited. It became a kind of liturgy, her breath slowing as the machine hummed. She wrote the numbers in a spiral notebook, dated each page, watched her body speak in quiet digits. The readings began to soften, and so did she. It wasn't about fear anymore. It was about staying ahead of forgetting. Each number, each check, was a promise she made to her future self. I still see you. I still care if you're here. Some rituals save us not with noise, but with attention. 5. Cognitive decline and isolation. Lena lost her husband in the fall, after 42 years of shared tea, shared silence, and the gentle tap of his fingers on her back when sleep took too long. At first, it was just the quiet that grew too big. The radio still played, the light still came in through the curtains, but time no longer passed the same way. She stopped finishing sentences, stopped finishing books, left drawers open, dishes half dried, not in rebellion, just because she forgot where she was going between here and there. One morning, she poured hot water over dry oats, forgot the kettle was still cold. Her daughter called it grieving. The doctor called it cognitive softening. But Lena only knew that the corners of her thoughts had started rounding off. That name she once carried like pearls now slipped through her hands like steam. Her granddaughter began coming on Sundays, not to fix, just to sit. She brought turmeric tea and crossword books. She read out loud, let silence last. They did puzzles slowly, sometimes without finishing. And something returned, not perfectly, not the sharpness Lena once used to organize the whole household, but something small, a sparkle at the edge of her recall, a thread between her and the room. The neurologist smiled, said stimulation and connection can slow the fade, said what pills couldn't do, presence might. Now, Each evening, Lena places a puzzle piece beside her tea. Sometimes she finds where it goes, sometimes she just holds it, but always she breathes. Because sometimes what the mind needs is not to be sharpened, but to be held long enough to want to stay. Not all loss announces itself. Some of it slips in sideways, in the way your body flinches before a movement you used to trust, in the way your mind forgets a name it once held like breath. It isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always hurt. Sometimes it just softens. Edges blur, steps shorten. Desire fades into comfort, and comfort fades into stillness. You don't even notice when it stopped feeling like your own handwriting, your own laughter, your own face in the mirror. And that's the quiet ache of aging, not just losing things, but realizing you've already been letting them go in pieces. One skipped walk, one unopened book, one conversation left half-finished because it was easier to nod than to ask. But here's the part no one told us. You are allowed to grieve even the smallest departures. The fact that the stairs feel steeper, that the wind feels louder, that a name, a taste, a morning ritual doesn't come back the way it once did. Grief isn't only for what dies, it's for what leaves quietly. What you only notice has gone when you turn to reach for it, and it's not there. But grief, when met gently, doesn't need to end things. It can remind, re-stir, reweave. You can let a piece go and still love what it was, still honor what it gave you. And in that small softness, that moment of noticing without resisting, something else opens. Not youth, not restoration, but presence, and the sacred act of still being here to name what remains. Staying alive isn't about fixing everything. It's not about making the body young, or the mind quick, or the house spotless again. It's about return. Not to who you were, but to who you still are beneath the dust of forgetting and the weight of adaptation. Because the truth is, you haven't disappeared. You've just shifted. Your center moved inward. Your voice got quieter. But you're still here, beneath it all, waiting to be re-met. The world is full of messages telling you to do more, move more, eat better, live longer. But what if living longer begins with noticing where you already are? Your feet on the floor, your name said slowly, your breath. Not deep maybe, but present. Maybe the measure isn't how far you walk, but how fully you inhabit the walk you take. Maybe the return isn't a triumph, just a soft circling back to the parts of you that still want light on the windowsill and warmth in the hands. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are simply invited again and again to re-enter the moment you're already in. And sometimes that's enough. To stir the tea slowly, to tie the laces yourself, to whisper one word you thought had left you, because it didn't. It was just waiting for you to slow down enough to hear it again. Some exits don't come with noise. They arrive like dusk, soft, unannounced, settling in the spaces we forgot to name. But neither does healing. It rarely enters with fanfare. It doesn't shout, "You're better now." It just lingers in a slower spoon, a breath you didn't have to fight for, a name that rises again without being chased. Healing isn't always progress. Sometimes it's permission to be here as you are, with all that has faded and all that remains. It comes in teaspoons, in soft shoes lined up by the door, in water boiling before tea, in the act of waking up and sitting quietly before the day makes a single demand. You don't have to reclaim everything. You just have to touch something gently again. A puzzle piece, a porch railing, your own wrist pulsing under your fingers. If you remembered even one thing today, one way your body speaks, one reason to move toward warmth, then you are already returning. And if walking slower feels like falling behind, let this be your reminder. Some lives are not meant to race. They're meant to ripple, in kindness, in noticing, in staying. So, if your breath is still with you, even a little, so are we. Not to lead, not to instruct, just to walk beside you in whatever direction you still wish to go. Until next time, take one slower breath and take care of your story.